Intelligence is not a gift. It is a condemnation. The condemnation of seeing the truth in a world that prefers comfortable lies. Why are intelligent people feared by society? This is the reality that many are not prepared to accept. We live in a society that celebrates intelligence in theory, but fears it in practice. We glorify the geniuses of the past while silencing the critical thinkers of the present. We praise wisdom in inspirational quotes, but reject its bearers when they point out the incongruities in our own behavior. Think about it. The same society that venerates Einstein on motivational posters would, most likely, have ignored or ridiculed him if he were alive today, questioning our certainties, challenging our conventions, exposing our contradictions. Have you felt this? That uncomfortable silence in a room when you say what everyone thinks, but no one dares to speak. That look of strangeness when you question a belief that everyone blindly accepts. You are not alone, and you are not wrong. What you are experiencing is the price of clarity. The cost of seeing through the layers of self-deception that most people build to endure existence. Your sharp perception is not a character flaw. It is a lucidity that few can tolerate. And there is a pattern to this. A pattern that repeats itself throughout human history, in different cultures, in different eras. The messenger who brings the uncomfortable truth is rarely received with gratitude. On the contrary, they are often isolated, ridiculed, or ostracized. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher who dared to look into the abyss of human nature without blinking, explained 200 years ago why your clarity is so threatening to society. And today, we will unravel the 7 reasons why your mind is feared, not to feed a superiority complex, but to understand the mechanism behind this rejection, so that you understand that the discomfort your intelligence causes in others is not your fault. It is a reflection of their limitations, not yours. Here is the truth that will set you free. Society does not fear your intelligence. It fears the mirror that you represent. Your ability to see through facades forces others to face their own contradictions, the bubbles of illusion they have built to feel safe. When you make an insightful observation about the inconsistencies of an argument, you are not just questioning ideas. You are challenging the psychological comfort those ideas provide. When you point out hypocrisy in social behavior, you are not just criticizing actions. You are exposing the abyss between who people pretend to be and who they really are. Most people live in a state of functional denial. They create convenient narratives about themselves, about their relationships, about how the world works. These narratives rarely correspond to reality, but they offer something more valuable: psychological comfort, the illusion of control, the fantasy of justice, the feeling of security. And then you arrive, with your uncomfortable insight, and put a mirror in front of these illusions. You don't need to be cruel or direct. Your mere presence, your analytical gaze, your refusal to participate in the collective fantasy is enough to cause discomfort. Schopenhauer called this the world as representation, a carefully constructed reality, full of tacit agreements and convenient lies. The intelligent person is a danger to this world, because they are by nature a bubble burster. In his work, The World as Will and Representation, Schopenhauer argues that we live in 2 simultaneous realities: the world as it really is, the will, and the world as we perceive and interpret it, the representation. Most people are content to live exclusively at the level of representation, the surface of things, appearances, social conventions that make life tolerable. The intelligent person, however, can see beyond this facade. They perceive the will, the brute, irrational, and often cruel force that moves the world. They see the primitive impulses that hide behind our most refined behaviors. They recognize the futility of many of our pursuits and the illusory nature of many of our consolations. And this fear of truth manifests in 7 clear ways. 7 reasons why you are, and always will be, feared by those who live in superficiality. By understanding these reasons, you will not only better understand why you often feel like a stranger in your own world, but first, leave your like so we know you're enjoying it, and subscribe to the channel now, because here, you will always have deep topics being addressed, philosophical analyses that make sense with your reality. Now, let's continue our journey to discover how to transform this clarity of vision, this curse, into your greatest strength. 4. The 7 weapons of intellect that frighten the crowd. Reason 1. You are a destroyer of illusions. Most people live by comfortable narratives. Work hard and you'll be rewarded. Love always wins. Follow the rules and you'll be happy. You, with your analytical mind, see the exceptions, the flaws, the nuances. When you point out that the emperor is naked, you're not being negative. You're destroying the collective illusion that keeps everyone warm. And nothing is more frightening than the cold of reality. Schopenhauer understood that human beings need illusions to endure existence. He called this the veil of Maya, the necessary lies that cover the brutal truth of reality. People build belief systems, adopt unfounded optimistic views, and cling to irrational hopes, all to make tolerable the fact that we exist briefly in an indifferent universe. When you critically analyze these illusions, you are not just intellectually disagreeing. You are threatening the very psychological defense mechanism that allows people to function. You remove the anesthetic that alleviates existential pain. That's why reactions to your lucidity are so disproportionate. It's not rational disagreement. It's panic. The same kind of panic a person would feel if you removed their security blanket during a storm. They are not reacting to your arguments, but to the vulnerability your arguments expose. Reason 2. Your validation is internal. The social economy works based on the exchange of approval. The intelligent man, however, develops an internal source of self-esteem. Like Nietzsche's Zarathustra, he becomes his own master. He doesn't need likes to feel valuable, nor followers to feel accompanied. He breaks the main currency of the social system, becoming economically independent in a much deeper sense. This emotional independence is deeply disturbing to the social fabric. Most human interactions are based on an implicit exchange system. I value you, so you should value me back. I agree with your opinions, so you should agree with mine. I offer you acceptance, so you owe me loyalty. The intelligent person, accustomed to the solitude of deep thought, learns to derive their sense of value from within. They evaluate their own ideas based on their internal consistency and correspondence with reality, not based on how many people applaud. They develop what Schopenhauer called an inner fortress, a mental refuge that makes external approval superfluous. This makes them impossible to control through the most basic mechanism of human socialization, the threat of rejection. While most people will do almost anything to avoid being excluded or ridiculed, the person with internal validation can endure disapproval without crumbling. And this makes them, paradoxically, even more magnetic. There is something deeply attractive about someone who doesn't desperately need your approval. But there is also something deeply threatening. For this type of person exposes, through contrast, how dependent others are on external validation. Reason 3. You dare to question the unquestionable. Every society is based on taboos, things that simply are not questioned. The intelligent person, driven by curiosity, does not respect these limits. They ask why, about traditions, beliefs, and rules. These questions threaten the very foundation of order, as they suggest that the basis of everything may not be as solid as it seems. Schopenhauer observed that societies function through what he called worldly wisdom, a set of rules, traditions, and assumptions that are accepted without examination. Some of these elements are explicit, laws, but most are implicit, customs, values, unstated expectations. The ordinary person accepts these elements as if they were natural laws, immutable, inevitable, unquestionable. The intelligent person, however, recognizes that they are social constructs, created by humans, maintained by consensus, and therefore subject to criticism and revision. When you ask, why do we do it this way? You are not just seeking information. You are implicitly suggesting that it could be done in another way. You are transforming what seemed like a natural law into a human choice, and choices can be changed. This is deeply destabilizing for those who derive security from the permanence of social structures. Without realizing it, you are removing the ground beneath their feet, transforming the solid into liquid, the certain into questionable. The defensive reaction often comes in the form of statements like, "That's how it's always been," or "Some things shouldn't be questioned." Attempts to restore the illusion of solidity that your questioning threatened. Reason 4. You are immune to emotional manipulation. Social control is often exercised through emotional appeals, guilt, and group pressure. The intelligent person can separate emotion from argument. They analyze the intention behind the words. This makes them incredibly difficult to manipulate through populist speeches, aggressive marketing, or emotional blackmail. You cannot control someone who understands your game. Schopenhauer, in his work, The Art of Being Right, dissected the rhetorical strategies people use to win debates when they don't have truth on their side. He understood that most human persuasion is not based on logic, but on the manipulation of emotions: fear, guilt, shame, desire for belonging. The intelligent person, trained in critical analysis, develops a kind of mental immune system against these tactics. When someone tries to manipulate them with guilt, "After all I've done for you," they recognize the tactic. When confronted with a false dilemma, "Either you agree with me, or you're my enemy," they identify the fallacy. When pressured to accept something because everyone believes it, they remain skeptical. This immunity to manipulation is seen as a threat by those who depend on these tactics to maintain control. Whether politicians, marketers, religious leaders, or even manipulative family members, your ability to see through emotional rhetoric and focus on the substance of the argument removes from them the main tool of influence. It's as if you could see the magician's hand while everyone else is distracted by the trick. And nothing irritates a magician more than someone who sees through the illusion and refuses to pretend enchantment. Reason 5. Your loyalty is to truth, not to the group. Philosopher Kierkegaard stated that the crowd is untruth. The intelligent person feels this in their skin. If they have to choose between loyalty to a group, family, friends, political party, and loyalty to truth, they will suffer. But choose truth. This radical integrity is seen as betrayal by the group, which demands blind loyalty. Human groups, whether primitive tribes or modern nations, political parties or sports fans, function through a basic principle: us against them. Adherence to the group requires that you accept certain convenient truths and ignore certain inconveniences, all in the name of solidarity. Schopenhauer recognized that most people prefer to belong than to be right. They cheerfully sacrifice accuracy on the altar of conformity. The intelligent person, however, feels an almost physical need for alignment with the truth, even when this means misalignment with the group. This loyalty to truth above any tribe is seen as a form of betrayal. And indeed it is. You are betraying the tribal principle in favor of a more universal principle. You are choosing to be a citizen of reality instead of a citizen of a specific group with its convenient narratives. The common reaction to this stance is to accuse you of arrogance, of lack of team spirit, of thinking you know more than everyone else. And you've probably heard the phrase, "Sometimes it's better to be happy than to be right," a mantra that reveals precisely the choice you refuse to make. Reason 6. Your calmness exposes others' insecurity. In a heated discussion, while everyone gets agitated, the intelligent person tends to remain silent, observing and analyzing. This calmness is interpreted as arrogance or contempt. In reality, it simply exposes how irrational and reactive other people are being. Your serenity is a spotlight on others' insecurity, and no one likes to be exposed. Schopenhauer valued calmness as an intellectual virtue. He observed that people reacted emotionally not because they felt too much, but because they thought too little. The emotional storm is, frequently, a symptom of cognitive confusion. The person cannot clearly articulate what they think, so they loudly express what they feel. The intelligent person, accustomed to the discipline of clear thinking, can maintain composure even in heated discussions. They separate the argument from the person, the idea from the emotion. They do not confuse volume with substance, nor passion with precision. This analytical calmness is often misinterpreted. People assume you are cold, distant, arrogant, or indifferent. In reality, you may be deeply engaged, just at the level of ideas, not at the level of reactive emotions. What bothers most, however, is the mirror effect of your calmness. When everyone is shouting and you remain serene, you inadvertently expose their lack of control. Your composure becomes a contrast that highlights the irrationality around. And, as Schopenhauer well understood, few are willing to see themselves as they are, especially in moments of emotional loss of control. Reason 7. You are uncontrollable and unpredictable. Adding all this up, we arrive at the final reason. A person who doesn't need validation, who questions everything, who cannot be manipulated, and who is loyal to truth is, by definition, uncontrollable. Society functions based on predictability. The intelligent man is an element of chaos in this ordered system. He cannot be predicted, therefore, he cannot be controlled. And that, my friend, is the true threat. Schopenhauer understood that society is, largely, a control system. Not necessarily a malicious or orchestrated control, but a system of expectations, rewards, and punishments that keeps people in predictable lines of behavior. All human socialization is, in a sense, a training for predictability. The ordinary person can be controlled through simple mechanisms. Offer them approval and they will behave in a certain way. Threaten them with rejection and they will avoid certain behaviors. Appeal to their tribal emotions and they will follow the herd. Involve them in rituals and traditions and they will rarely question the purpose. The intelligent person, who brings together all the characteristics we've discussed, is immune to these mechanisms. They cannot be controlled by the offer of approval, as their validation is internal. They cannot be manipulated by emotional appeals, as they see through them. They cannot be kept in line by unquestionable traditions, as they question everything. They cannot be contained by tribal loyalties, as their loyalty is to truth. In summary, all the tools that society uses to keep people predictable and controllable are ineffective with you. And this makes you an element of uncertainty, an agent of potential change, a variable that cannot be easily inserted into the equation. That's why, as Schopenhauer observed, society reserves a special kind of distrust for the genuinely intelligent individual. It is not intelligence itself that is feared. It is the autonomy it enables. The ability to think for oneself is, ultimately, the ability to act for oneself. And a person who acts from their own analysis, instead of reacting to social incentives, is the greatest threat to any control system. Schopenhauer knew, and you also know, that this gift comes with a burden. The burden of loneliness, of misunderstanding, of the exhaustion of having to translate your thoughts to make them palatable. It's like wearing a crown of thorns. The royalty of intellect comes with the pain of incomprehension. This pain is real. You felt it when you realized you couldn't share your deepest thoughts with the people you love, for fear they wouldn't understand or would feel threatened. You felt it when you had to simplify your ideas until they almost lost their meaning, just to be accepted in a casual conversation. You felt it when you were labeled negative for pointing out flaws in a plan, or complicated for considering nuances that others ignore. It's a strangely contradictory experience. Seeing with clarity can bring a deep intellectual satisfaction, and, at the same time, a deep emotional loneliness. As Schopenhauer wrote, "Solitude is the fate of all exceptional minds." The philosopher compared the experience to being at a different altitude. From the top of the mountain, you see farther, but also feel the more rarefied air and the isolation of distance. Those in the valley may be together, sharing the warmth of their proximity, but their vision is limited by the terrain around them. You've probably tried to come down the mountain, simplify your thinking, contain your observations, participate in collective illusions. Perhaps you've even managed it for some time. But there's something uncomfortable in this accommodation, isn't there? As if you were betraying not only your intelligence, but something more fundamental, your own nature. But Schopenhauer did not write to condemn us to despair, but to free us through truth. Your intelligence is not a flaw to be corrected, it is a responsibility. You are a beacon in a sea of fog. Your function is not to shout at lost ships, but simply to shine. Shine with clarity, with compassion, and with the courage to be who you are. This is the paradox that Schopenhauer finally offers. The same lucidity that can be a source of suffering can also be the source of a deep serenity. By accepting the nature of reality, including the reality of being frequently misunderstood, you conquer a form of freedom that few know. The philosopher found consolation in art, music, and contemplation. He discovered that, although he rarely found minds that truly understood him, he could find refuge in the great works of other thinkers through time, a conversation with those who had walked before on similar paths. And perhaps this is the deepest reframing. Your clarity is not a curse, but a specific type of calling. Not to convert others to your vision, not to prove that you are right, but to keep the flame of truth alive in a world that prefers the smoke of comfortable illusion. You don't need to become a bitter cynic or a resentful loner. You can cultivate compassion for those who cling to their illusions. After all, as Schopenhauer recognized, these illusions are often the only shield people have against the suffering of existence. Don't dim your light so that others feel more comfortable in their darkness. The world already has enough darkness. Time proved that Schopenhauer was right, and will prove that your clarity is right too. Recognize that your social discomfort is not a character flaw or an emotional deficiency. It is the natural result of seeing too much in a world that thrives on partial blindness. This awareness doesn't make you superior. It makes you different. And being different is neither better nor worse. It's just lonelier. But you are not alone in your loneliness. Throughout history, minds like yours have found each other. Through books, art, rare and precious conversations where it was finally not necessary to translate or simplify. Today, we have more tools than ever to find these connections. If you've ever felt punished for your intelligence, leave an IC in the comments, so that others like us know they are not alone. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next philosophical analyses that go beyond the superficial. And share this video. Not to show off, but to find the other beacons in the darkness, those who, like you, seek a deeper understanding of reality. Because although Schopenhauer was right about the burden of clarity, he also understood that this burden becomes lighter when shared. Not with everyone, that would be impossible, but with the few who can truly understand. You don't need to convert the world to your vision. You don't need to make everyone understand. You just need to be authentic in your clarity and compassionate in your understanding. As Schopenhauer wrote, compassion is the basis of all morality. Be compassionate toward those who fear the truth you represent, for that fear comes from human fragility, not from malice. Be compassionate with yourself in the moments of isolation that your clarity inevitably brings, and be open to those rare moments of genuine connection with other minds that see like yours. They are the true treasures of existence. Remember, they don't fear you. They fear the truth you carry. And truth, however uncomfortable it may be, is the only path to genuine freedom. For you and, potentially, for those brave enough to listen to you.